It's time to confront your cravings and see what life can look like without the enticing grip of sugar every day. Today, we'll be discussing artificial sweeteners, addiction, and our 30-day sugar detox challenge. In studio, I'm joined with Jamie Woodle, integrative nutrition health coach and master of science in health education, as well as Joe Horn, board certified holistic health practitioner. So Joe, what are some signs that you may be over-consuming sugar in your daily life?
So the answer to that is so long, it's really difficult to collapse it to, like 3 bullet points.
Right.
3 primary side effects of eating too much sugar. It can affect metabolic health, hormonal health, mood, depression, even senses of foreboding doom. People that deal with anxiety that have maybe even been prescribed medications for things like personality or mood dysfunction by their medical doctors, which is becoming more and more, by the way, you can look this up, commonplace, even in our children now. And of course, we don't separate out the fact that we're also loading them up every day in their school lunches with excitotoxins, artificial sweeteners,
inflammatory oils,
things that are literally chemically designed to addict you to them.
Yes.
I know it sounds sinister to those maybe that are, eating the cereals and doing the drive-thrus, that this guy on Return to Eden is almost putting forth that there's this plot by big corporations to seduce children into consuming these addictive foods and things. But basically, yes.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah, that's it. And it's really obvious if you take a step back and just do any modicum of research whatsoever. Right. Excitotoxins, artificial sweeteners in particular. And so all one has to do is flip, your yogurt stick around. And when you see things like natural flavors, but they don't identify an actual food or a fruit source, more than likely you're dealing with something that's been renamed, but is actually something like an aspartame or a saccharin family artificial sweetener. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so these are absolutely guilty of addicting you like any kind of other drug. You find that you have a hankering. There's your Friday night go-to. You start to food associate with recess time or your happy moments of play. But when you look at metabolic health, when you look at liver function, in a lot of naturopathic medicine, a lot of doctors will refer to the liver as kind of the mood center. Wherever your liver is, that is essentially what your mood is going to reflect.
That's interesting.
So if you have a fatty liver, if your liver can't keep up with all the seed oils that you're consuming and the sugars that you're eating, more than likely you're going to feel things like brain fog, fatigue, frustration. This also, of course, now contributes to things like low testosterone in men. Phthalates, bisphenol A, plastic lining. These are called xenoestrogens. They're on a lot of our packaging. They're inside of a lot of these little handy cups that you run your coffee through every morning, giving your body that supply of phthalates, bisphenol A, xenoestrogens that go into the body and basically confuse the cells of your body when you're methylating. A lot of this is sugar laboring the liver and blocking metabolic health.
Well, and that can translate into other issues. So what are some other issues that people experience from an overload of sugar?
Well, there's a shocking amount of the population who are likely suffering right now with insulin resistance.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe they don't even realize it until it becomes full-blown, maybe out-of-control diabetes, and they have to go to the doctor.
PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome,
exactly.
through the sky.
So sugar can be affecting the body, and we don't even realize it until some of the major red flags show up that can no longer be ignored. Things like white tongue.
Yeah, well, white tongue. So if you're one of those that wakes up or midday realizes even after having brushed your tongue is turning white again, this is often indicative of a liver that's not keeping up with the load that you've demanded of it, along with overgrowths in your gut flora like candidas. So fungal or yeast overgrowths. And so be watching for white tongue. If you're one of those that deals with white tongue, it's often that there's an underlying root cause. And maybe for you, something like a dandelion root tea. Or burdock root.
Milk thistle?
Milk thistle's another one, yeah.
Even in addition to things like the liver, there's also its impact on the adrenals as well.
Yeah, well, adrenals take a huge hit because of a lot of the things we've talked about. When your hormones are out of balance, the body does primarily 2 things, and it'll start mass producing cortisol in times of stress or lack of energy.
Which causes you to gain weight.
Which causes the weight, regardless of what you're eating. Even if you're on, a low-carb diet, you will still put on the weight. Just like you can lose weight sitting in a chair and never exercising the unhealthy way. You can control a lot of this with just depraving your body of nutrients or things that it needs, like a healthy sugar. But your adrenals now have to step up because it's pumping cortisol out, which keeps you in a state of fight or flight.
And most people wouldn't tie overconsumption of sugar to then high levels of cortisol
No.
and adrenal fatigue and burnout.
No.
Well, especially not with the kind of lifestyles that we all lead that are so demanding.
Unfortunately, one of the things that we first are drawn to are artificial sweeteners.
Absolutely. Things like aspartame or sucralose, xylitol.
Yeah. And then some of the ones that are thought to be a little more benign, such as stevia leaf extract, monk
Right.
fruit, erythritol. Some people can tolerate that. I have tried that and I cannot.
I don't mind a little bit of xylitol in something like a healthier option for a chewing gum or something like that.
Yeah, that's one thing. But again, moderation is the thing.
Yeah, but
And-
I would say there's no moderation for a saccharin or an aspartame.
Right.
You're just straight up poisoning yourself.
Yeah.
naturally, the dopamine release that we get from these artificial sweeteners and sugar is something that we crave. We almost become
Oh, yeah.
addicted to those types of feelings. And food companies absolutely capitalize on
They do.
this. If you
Yeah.
look into it, there are many popular food chains we've discussed in previous episodes that literally have teams of scientists to design the ingredients list for their foods in such a way that we are almost powerless to fight against these chemical addictions that we have.
Well, one of the big ones is high fructose corn syrup. And if you look at almost every children's product, pretending to have something to do with the fruits of the forest and their little
Right.
handy cup for lunch, to literally like taking fruit that would have been okay and then dumping high fructose corn syrup in the liquid that surrounds the
Yeah.
fruit. So it just come on, man. And what happens is they become so addicted to these foods that the parents actually feel that they're rewarding these children because it becomes their favorite box cereal or it becomes their favorite sandwich or whatever. And of course, these companies absolutely are banking on this. There's science that reinforces it. People always assume, Jamie, that there's this they. They do this with pet foods. They do this with foods that we eat. They assume that the FDA or AFCO or somebody, some benevolent arm of the government is going to clearly regulate these ingredients out of our foods. Why would they if they knew that these foods were addictive or led to metabolic health dysfunction or even cancer? Why would they ever permit these to be used? Some of our politicians are finally starting to speak out about this.
Yeah.
Not nearly enough of them, but they're wanting to make America healthy again. And you look at the ingredients that other countries have literally banned.
Yes, they have.
Pesticides, herbicides, you will not use this flavor
Dyes.
enhancer,
Exactly.
dyes, red dye number blank, blank, blank. It's not permitted. But here in the United States, we are one of the sickest nations in the world now.
Yes, we are.
I find it to be almost terrifying to consider that these people that we just all take for granted that they are going to protect us are willfully uneducating the American people in an effort to increase their own profit margins.
Yeah, and we're genetically susceptible too. Like, for example, I've had conversations with people where they'll say, alcoholism runs in my family or whatever it is. I know for me specifically on both sides, on my mother's side and my father's side, there's a lot of alcoholism, a lot of different addictions. And I think it's hypothesized to basically boil down to how your body processes dopamine. And some people are more of a dopamine seeker than others. It's really interesting because food as an addiction is unique in that we need food to live.
Right.
But as you say, we've been so manipulated. The system is capitalized on our vulnerabilities. And there is a lot of debate on whether we can call, say, specifically sugar addiction. Is it a substance abuse issue or just a substance use issue? So there's a lot of debate on how to define that because are we abusing it or are these effects because we're using it? I would really lean in the camp of we're abusing it. Maybe
Me too.
not knowingly, because we're so sabotaged. But this is real. People really are addicted to sugar, and it is hard to cut out. So for our 30-day sugar detox challenge, we are challenging you to go 30 days with very minimal sugar. And we mean sugar only in the forms of honey, dates, date sugar, perhaps monk fruit, and avoid anything. If you are looking at a label and it says added sugars, stay away.
No
Absolutely
high
stay
fructose
away.
corn syrup.
Fruits are okay.
Yeah.
So that would be a great swap if you're used to having a dessert after every meal. If you want to have a few slices of an apple or some strawberries, give yourself some grace. This is going to be uncomfortable at first. So let's talk about the benefits on why it's important and worth it to hang in there when you are having these unfortunate withdrawal symptoms.
Absolutely. Now, there are going to be some physiological ramifications to this detox. As with any harmful substance, you may experience symptoms like withdrawal, headaches,
Irritability.
yeah. difficulty concentrating, difficulty sleeping, it's important to remember that this is a temporary state. Once your body's able to detox, you will find your equilibrium again. It's important to stay strong through those more negative symptoms.
That's the understatement of the century.
Yeah. It is real, having withdrawal symptoms from sugar. It's absolutely real. If you've ever
I thought I was dying. I am not exaggerating. I'm serious. Around a decade ago, I'm coming off of all of this stuff. I had my colon surgery, long story. They took out half my colon. That was supposed to fix my diverticulosis. It made my life so much worse. I literally thought something horrible was happening in my body. I thought maybe my kidneys were shutting down. I was starting to literally Google kidney, renal dysfunction. I had like the worst flu symptoms. And by the way, I went really fast.
Okay.
It was overnight.
You cold turkey.
Cold turkey.
Okay.
I went from a lifestyle of peanut butter, beer, bread, cereal, and the next day it's bone broth, vegetables. I can't even explain to you. I remember thinking I might be dying. Something is wrong in my body. I would have almost bartered with money that I didn't even have at the time. I might have almost gone into debt. The thought of wheat toast with butter. I'm telling you, it hurt my saliva glands to think of wheat toast. I wanted bread so hard. But around the 2-month mark, I started coming out of the nausea. And by the way, this doesn't have to happen to you. This is just what happened to me because I went overnight and I was desperately addicted to carbs and breads and sugars. If you took last week's program and this week's program, or at least the part 1 and 2 of everything we've been talking about, you could just say everything we've been saying, you would reduce or maybe mitigate or step away from all of the disastrous stuff we've been talking about.
The long-term
starters,
effects.
just reverse the list we just covered.
Absolutely. I like that I've done this in the past, and it resets your sugar tolerance. So for example, I started using much less sugar, or I'll switch to monk fruit. And then all of a sudden after the detox, maybe I want to go back to my normal, and it's too sweet.
Yeah.
It's way too sweet.
Well, and it almost has, when you go, because I've done this prior as well, when you go from the natural sugars to try and go back to those heavily processed things, there's a chemical-y taste. It's almost off-putting. I really enjoy feeling like I have control of my cravings.
Yeah.
That's something that's deeply important to me. So once you get past that detox period, and you can walk past the aisle that has those little bags of candy and not be so physically drawn to those, almost compelled to purchase them and get that dopamine rush. That is a very powerful feeling for me. That definitely feels like winning in my book.
So Kendra, when you've done this in the past, what were some tips that you can pass on to our viewers to help you when sugar craving hits?
Yeah, because inevitably they will.
Yes, they will.
Being kind to yourself, understanding that it is progress and not perfection that you're searching for. I find redirecting myself to be a really valuable tool in terms of curbing those cravings. So finding an activity that I enjoy, going for a walk, playing an outdoor game with my kids, things that will divert my attention long enough for that craving to pass are really valuable to me in the long run.
I think for myself, when I focused my meals on protein, like a really quality protein, maybe find a new recipe for, chicken or something and get excited about that and focus on the protein, or a new vegetable recipe, and kind of minimize some of those starches that have been lingering, or maybe you get a little too excited about the roll with your dinner. Maybe that's a sign.
Guilty.
Maybe you need to take a break from foods like that. You can also really focus on, maybe this is a season where you need to concentrate on quality sleep. Maybe read up on some tips on sleep hygiene. Things you can do, like minimizing screen time before sleep, making sure the room's completely dark. Take this time to focus on yourself, your health, your mental well-being.
And your family. That's something that always helps me when I'm trying to change or adjust a part of my life. And setting my children up for long-term success with their health is something that I think we as mothers and fathers always want to do. So this is a great time to take advantage of the teaching opportunities and show your children that, yes, sometimes we have to recognize that changes need to be made, but we're capable of doing those things.
There's also something really interesting that I read once, and I've tried it. It works, at least for me. Let's say you're really craving a brownie. If you just take a quiet moment to imagine yourself eating the brownie, you may start to salivate. Joe's looking at me like I'm crazy. No, really.
I just haven't heard this before. I'm waiting. Go ahead.
If you imagine yourself eating it, like not just quick, nom, 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 but like savoring and
the
imagining the
mouthfeel.
flavor and the mouth feel, your brain will almost interpret that like you have eaten a brownie, and you'll find it's easier to resist. It has worked for me. So
There's
something interesting there.
absolutely a psychological component when it comes to any addiction.
I haven't tried that one.
You'll have to try that. It's important to remember that this addiction, a big part of it is that component of dopamine. We want that dopamine hit. It draws us in. It makes us happy temporarily.
Yeah.
And so if you do something else, another activity that releases the dopamine, maybe you snuggle a pet. That's my favorite go-to.
Big hugging with my little girl.
Yeah. Listening to music.
Reading a good book.
Taking a walk in nature.
Making a painting.
Anything that gives you that same release of excitement and satisfaction, that can be a good distraction.
See, you women are just so pragmatic about this. You've thought about all these things. What I did was so barbarian that I don't even think I could recommend somebody else do what I did. I survived it. It was horrific. I would give you my 2 tricks. One of them's not a trick. I asked God Almighty desperately to make all of these feelings go away. And with enough weeks, they eventually did, because I never went back. We're talking cold turkey, no more Butterfingers, no more nothing. And again, I was sick. One is I made really good friends with a healthy chewing gum called Spree. And when I say healthy, I just mean it's not as devastating as like getting something with artificial sweeteners in it, which all gums do have now. They have saccharin or aspartame. But Spree is one of those at the time of this recording that you can still get in like cinnamon or bubblegum flavored or
I like
mint,
the
whatever.
fruit one the best.
And if I was having like just devastating cravings, I would just chew that, and it took my brain and it gave it a job and did something else. The other thing was instead of just wanting to be hungry all the time, say, God, life can't just be me being dizzy and hungry all the time, was I started eating mixed nuts. So give yourself a half cup of cashews, and you'll find that between the healthy fats and everything else, walnuts, for me at least, and we're talking at the time, 280-pound guy, eating just a half cup of nuts, within about 20 minutes, my body went, okay, he ate something. And it was a healthy alternative. Actually gave me something like a protein or a healthy fat that my body could use. My chewing gum trick and the mixed nuts. For those men out there that are like, I am not going to paint or go on a walk.
That's
No
fair.
offense.
Okay.
Well, maybe you
For the men that
should.
went barbarian style that are just suffering this thing, maybe try a handful of mixed nuts.
Do you have a great tip or trick on dealing with sugar cravings? If so, leave a comment below. We would love to hear from you. We are all out of time. Thank you so much for joining us, Joe. Always a pleasure, Jamie. Join us next time right here on Return to Eden.